Let's get on now with the first event for the day. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Founder and Vice Chairman, InfoEdge India.
How many Sanjeevs in this room? I've met 7 since the morning. Yeah, I'm Sanjeev number 8. Okay, I graduated from IMA in '89. I had worked 3 years in advertising before that, and I worked a couple of years after that in GlaxoSmithKline. In 1990, I quit my job. Okay, and how many startup entrepreneurs here? How many people who've done a startup or currently in startups? No, fair number. So fundamentally, I believe that when you choose to do a startup, you are making a life choice. It is not a career choice. It's not a job choice. It's a life choice. You're choosing to lead a different life. Right? And the difference between people who are educated and become entrepreneurs and people who are perhaps not so educated and become entrepreneurs is that we are entrepreneurs by choice. We have a choice to work in a great company as an employee, as a professional manager, and yet we choose to become entrepreneurs. And in my case, my reason was very simple. I had spent 5 years in the corporate sector working for 2 large multinationals, and I had come to the conclusion that I did not want that life. Right? So, as a boy growing up in a middle-class family, father in the government in urban India, you are trained to seek a good career, because middle-class India teaches its youngsters to be risk-averse, to crave financial security. So you join the government, you become a doctor, you become an engineer, you seek a good job in a good company, and hopefully life is made, and it's very good in the arranged marriage market. Yeah. I decided somewhere along the way that, look, I did not want this. And the reason for this was that I could see my future if I continued where I was. Right? I knew that if I worked well, in 5 years' time, I'd be in that cabin if I stayed in the same company. In 10 years' time, in that cabin. Maybe in 15, 20 years' time, heading marketing in some company, maybe the same company. And I figured I didn't want that life. Okay? Because in my mid-20s, I was bothered by this question that if I continue in the corporate sector and I complete my career as a professional manager, when I'm 58 or 60 or whenever it is I stop working, and I look back on my life, what would I have had to show for it? And if I just spend my life doing what I'm doing, I won't be terribly happy with what I have to show for it. And I figured that and many of my friends were perhaps just prisoners of our visiting cards, our titles, and our EMIs. In India, they're called EMIs. And that's all we crave. If my car is 1 foot longer than yours, I'm smarter than you. If my house is 2 kilometers there and not in a SFS DDA flat, but it's in Vasant Vihar, I'm smarter than you. Yeah? And I didn't want to spend my life chasing that dream. Okay? And so I decided that I will quit and choose a different life. Of course, I'd done a smart thing. I married a batchmate from IMA, and she was working in Nestle. Yeah. So I lived off her salary for the next 5 years and experimented with my career. How many of us here are IIM alumni married to other IIM alumni? Good, you're halfway there. Yeah. Yeah. And so for the first 7 years, so I had no big plan, I had no vision, I had no big idea. This is 1990, pre-liberalization, India is not a very dynamic economy. I was running the company with a partner out of the servant quarter above the garage in my dad's house. For 7 years, we drifted and did 20 small things. Right? A salary survey, sold databases, trademark search reports, feasibility studies, teaching, training, some writing, and so on. Right? Anything to get by. So, the turnover would be 10 to 15 lakhs a year, and somehow, in the first 10 years, I couldn't take a salary for about 6 years. Yeah? But I was happy because, I was loving the independence, and besides, my wife was earning well. Yeah? And so it takes 2 years. Huh? It takes 2 years for a man to get used to living off his wife's salary. Now, once you get comfortable with that, it's okay. Yeah? But fundamentally, I was clear that I did not want that life. Let's see what happened with this life. Yeah? And in 97, we launched Naukri within the same company as one more small idea, because I'd done 50 small ideas, one more small idea within the company. And essentially, the idea came from an insight I had got. So when I was working in H&M, now called GlaxoSmithKline, I was product executive for Horlicks, and my former boss is in this room, my brother-in-law, Rajiv Chandra. He was a product manager. We used to sit in the open marketing hall, the junior executives. There were 8, 10 of us, and in the late 80s, there weren't any fancy offices, so there was no partitions and no cabins and no glass, and you could hear and see what each other did, what the other guy was doing. And I used to notice that every time the office copy of Business India would come in, everybody would read it from the back. Yeah? Because in those days, there were 35 to 40 pages of appointment ads at the back of Business India. It was the #1 appointment ad medium in the country. And these are guys who are all from the IIMs or other leading business schools. And they're in a company where if you want to work in Delhi, and you want FMCG, and you want marketing, and you want to work in an MNC, there are only 2 companies in Delhi in 1989. There was Nestle and H&M, and they did not hire from each other. So they were in the best place they could be. Yeah? And yet they would read the ads, and then they'd start discussing, hey man, there's this job going there, what do you think? Aren't we paid so badly? This whole bitching and moaning thing would start. And I used to think this is strange behavior. First of all, if you're getting a magazine, you should read the articles first. Second, you're in the best job you can be. You're never going to apply for a job. Right? It's a good company, good brand, pays well. Why are you complaining? So I realized that even if you're not looking for a job, you're looking at a job. Because you're always comparing, your conscious batch comparison. Am I being paid well enough? Am I doing well enough? What are the jobs in the market? So there's this whole curiosity thing and this whole envy thing. Right? And the next thing I noticed was that if every week, 2 or 3 different headhunters would call up, and they would try and headhunt one or the other of my colleagues. And I could hear the conversation. And every time it was a different headhunter with a different job in a different company, and these jobs are never advertised. So I realized that there's a massive, what appears in print is the tip of the iceberg. There's a massive market below the surface, which is, there are probably hundreds, maybe thousands of headhunters, and they're trying to, place people in companies. So there's this huge fragmented database of jobs out there, which if somebody were to keep live and current and keep on updating, it would be a very powerful magnet. Now, this is 1990 before the internet, so I didn't know what to do with this insight. So it became one of those file and forget kind of ideas, and I quit my job and we did 20 other things for the next 7 years. But when I saw the internet for the first time, in 1996, we launched Naukri. And I pulled out this old insight, and we launched Naukri using this insight. So, which brings me to my next point, that if you solve an unsolved problem, you will hit a hot button. Right? Now, unsolved problem means innovation, first mover, all of that. But basically, you will create a very powerful magnet if you are solving an unsolved problem. Right? And I learned this, how many here from IIM Ahmedabad? Yeah, and I learned this from the bootleggers in Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad was got prohibition, yet I think the per capita consumption of soda in Gujarat is among the highest in the country. When I was there were only 2 bootleggers in the city that we knew of. Everybody knew how to find them. And they didn't advertise, they didn't have to. People just turned up. Right? So if you solve an unsolved problem, right, and you are one of very few doing it, you don't have to sell. Customers will buy. So we launched Naukri, and when we launched Naukri, we simply took jobs from newspapers across the country and put them on the site, right? And traffic began to come. We didn't have to advertise. It was like the bootleggers in Ahmedabad, because people wanted to find out about jobs. And you are aggregating jobs from all over the country, putting them up for 1 month, and there are many more jobs than you find in a newspaper or a magazine, all in one place. And traffic began to come, and people began to apply to these jobs. And when people began to apply, in those days there was very little email, so it was hard copy, covering letter, CV, all of that. This is April 97. They would write in the covering letter, I saw your job on Naukri. And the HR guy who's receiving it would say, what is Naukri? I never advertised on Naukri, I advertised in the newspaper. And slowly they began to call us up. They find out about us and call us up, hey, what are you guys doing? And we said, look, it's public service. Okay, we're putting out your jobs and free of cost. I hope you don't mind. And then one day, in September 97, one guy called up from a small auto component company in Pune, and I forget the name now. And he said, look, I have 6 jobs that I have not advertised. Can I put them up on your site? And we said 350 rupees per job listing, or else 6,000 rupees annual subscription, unlimited jobs through the year. So he sent a check of 2,100 rupees within 2 days, and that's when we realized we have a monetization model. And we took out all the jobs we put up for the last 6 months, took out the names and addresses of the HR managers, and sent them all a letter saying, this is the internet, this is Naukri, you've probably got applications through us in the past, even though you advertised in the paper. And for 350 rupees per job, or 6,000 rupees, you can subscribe to our service. And here's the form, fill up the form, fax or courier to us, and we'll input the job and put it up. Most people didn't have internet connections then. When we launched Naukri, there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country. Yeah. So in the first year, that's actually the last 6 months of that financial year, 97, 98, we did a turnover of 2.5 lakhs. Yeah. But we got massive, we had begun to get press coverage, people were talking about us, we were getting traffic, there was buzz. Next year, 2.5 lakhs jumped to 18 lakhs. And that's when I realized for the first time that this could be a big idea. Yeah. Until then, I had thought it was one small idea. Because 18 lakhs was bigger than the rest of the company had ever been. Right? And we quickly stopped doing everything else. We just focused on Naukri. And 18 lakhs went to 36 lakhs. And we didn't know it, but there was a bubble on, and we began to get calls from investors saying, can we invest in your company? And I was completely baffled because nobody ever calls you up to give you money. Yeah? And that's when I began to read up and began to understand that, look, we could raise venture capital at a decent valuation. I understood what venture capital was about. I didn't know what it was about before then. And we raised 7.3 crores, that's 1.7 million US dollars in April 2000 for 15% of the company. It was a bubble valuation. But ICICI exited in 2006 at a return of about 28.5x, which is possibly the record for any early stage investment across any sector, any VC fund in India, ever since VC funds have been operating in India. And we raised the money, and we began to put the team together and launched new products, salespeople, and slowly grew the company. Which brings me to my third point, that, look, fundamentally, it's all about people. Yeah. The company now employs 2,500 people. It's plus another 2,500 people who work in the companies we've invested in. How many here from IIM Bangalore? Fair number. So here's the thing, right? I'm the founder, so I end up getting an undue share of the credit, right? The truth is that this is a collective effort of many people, and our CEO, I'm not CEO for the last 2 years, our CEO is from IIM Bangalore, and I would, although IIM Ahmedabad possibly claims ownership and credit in all public fora, the truth is this is as much an IIM Bangalore company as it is an IIM Ahmedabad company, yeah? And fundamentally, an entrepreneur to succeed, I think you'll have to learn to build trust across the table, whether it's with investors, customers, partners, colleagues, employees, whoever. And those of us who are managers, you won't make a great CEO of a company which is employing a large team unless you're really good with people. So the same quality is required. And I'll end by saying that, look, now, 16 years after we launched Naukri, 23 years after I became an entrepreneur, building a truly great company is the effort of a lifetime. Take a look at, so truly great companies are companies that last 100 years, 150 years and still lead. The company that lasted longest that I can think of, is the East India Company from 1603 or maybe 1608 to 1858. But they had a monopoly and they actually ruled the country, so that's different. But to build a really great company, whether you look at the company that have lasted in the tech space, Microsoft and Oracle, it's a lifetime's effort. Yeah. So I'm one of those entrepreneurs who does not believe in build to flip. This is not about the entrepreneur getting rich. This is about creating an institution, a brand, something that outlives you. And this was a legacy issue that was bothering me when I was working in GlaxoSmithKline. And therefore, I believe that building a truly great company is a lifetime's effort. And those of us who are doing startups, I mean, there's nothing wrong in building to flip. There's nothing wrong in selling. It's just what I believe. Yeah, thank you.
Wrapped. I hope you did find time to send a few questions. I have received a couple, so maybe, and we have time for just about 2 questions, so I'm going to put them both to you. The first one asks about, would you advise educated entrepreneurs to start early or gain some work experience before they start?
So this is a question I've asked often. So there are enough examples both ways. People who dropped out of college and succeeded, people who didn't go to college and succeeded, people who worked 30 years and succeeded, people who worked 5 years. I think you will know when it's the right time for you, right? It's a bit like asking the question, what's the right time to fall in love? No? Is it after 5 years of working in college? I mean, there's no answer. But you will know when you're ready to be an entrepreneur, right? And it'll be at a point of time when, the urge inside you. So there's this thing, right? So I could not, I had made up my mind to be an entrepreneur, and for 6 months, I could not quit. I would keep saying, I'll go tomorrow and, put in my papers, and I never did it. Simply because, I was scared. I was scared of giving up that monthly salary check. And I said, what will I do, supposing I don't earn money? Yeah. Eventually, at the end of 6 months, I was able to muster up the courage to resign. I could have done it, maybe 2 years earlier, maybe a year earlier. I think at least the education institutions of India are such that you don't have a great reality check at the end of engineering college or business school if you haven't worked. So my personal preference is for working, but it's up to each one of us.
So it's like falling in love. That answers all questions then. Okay, we have another one that's come in. Do we have time for maybe one more question? I can't resist. It's just such an exciting topic. What was the biggest challenge you faced once Naukri was a going concern? I'm sure you've been asked often about the challenges that came before.
So, what is a going concern? It is when you survive for the next day, right? And in the first 3 years of Naukri, we had no money. Right? We had very little money. So obviously it was about making sure your costs are really low because you're in control of your costs and not your revenue. So whatever the revenue is going to come, make sure your costs are lower than that. Right? So as a consequence, we had very little capital for the first 3 years of launching Naukri and therefore very poor infrastructure. I think that was one big challenge early on. And frankly, if ICICI had not invested the money, it's extremely unlikely that we'd been able to do what we've been able to do. We needed that capital. So I think most entrepreneurs in India face the challenge of having not enough capital. Some of them face a different challenge. They get now with a lot of venture capital in India, too much venture capital, they're chasing too few good deals. You end up getting too much money too soon, and then you tend to spend it suboptimally. But that's a challenge we didn't have.
Thank you. There are many more questions coming in now, but I think you'll have to keep them for the break. So I think if what you were trying to create was something that outlives you, there's no doubt that that's exactly what you managed to do. Congratulations.
I hope I don't die very soon, but...
That's not going to happen. And I am going to request Sanjeev Iyer now to come and give Sanjeev a small token of our appreciation for having made the time to come and speak to us. Thank you so much. I should mention that the gifts for our speakers and panelists today have been provided by Protsahan, an NGO that supports women from India's slums and disadvantaged children. Thank you, Protsahan, and kudos on the great work you're doing.